Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Nguyen with BluefirePoker.com. Today, I'm gonna do a video about making thin value bets, and I decided to use a hand I played about 2 months ago at 2-4 pot limit hold'em. And throughout this video, I'll kind of talk about what type of image you need, what type of opponent you want to thin value bet against, and the many variables. So here's the hand. It's a pretty normal open, not much to talk about from the cutoff. With 4-5 suited, the button folds, and I get 3-bet by Tiltosaurus Rex. Dangerous map folds. Tiltosaurus Rex, I don't know if you guys know him, he's probably one of the best 1, 2, and 2-4 pot limit regulars. I think he has huge results in the game. Super smart, super good, generally pretty tricky. And against me, I think he 3-bets kind of tight. And I think he'd mainly have a value range here. I guess it's kind of important to talk about my image as well. In these games, I think viewed as a pretty big calling station and a pretty big monkey. When I was playing these games, I guess for like a month or two, I was not super often, but often enough, bluffing off like 200 BB stacks, and I don't know, kind of viewed as a monkey. So I think that's how they view me. So he 3-bets me, I think, pretty tight, with mainly a value range, maybe some semi-bluffing hands. So I think it's going to be maybe pocket 8s plus, probably more likely like pocket 9s plus or pocket 10s plus. Ace Jack or better, King Queen suited, maybe King Jack suited, and then occasionally maybe like suited connectors like either 9-8 suited, 9-7 suited, or something like that. So against that range, I stoved it before I did the video. I have like 36% equity, but that doesn't matter too much. When we were talking about preflop equities, it matters a lot more when stacks are kind of shallow and we get a bigger percentage of our stacking preflop. In this case, when he 3-bets to 40, we're getting like 7 to 8% of our preflop stacks in. So there's still like a lot of room to maneuver, so we won't worry about our equity disadvantage too much. So I decided to call. Pretty standard. And I flop a gutter, so a 6 will make me a straight here, and he leads out pretty big. He bet 68 into 84, and I kind of like his bet sizing here a little bit, because normally I think somewhere around half pot is decent, but considering we're playing between 140 and 150 big ones to start the hand, I think he's going to want to bet his entire range like this to ensure that he gets stacks in by the river. So I think his bet size is kind of standard, and I also think it's good. Like, let's say he does bet like 45 here, 46. He kind of gives me a lot of incentive to maybe float, try to outplay him on later streets, and I definitely think he perceives me as a player that will float. So if he does have like, I don't know, King Queen, King Jack, Ace Queen, or something like that, and kind of wants to make decisions easier for himself, he can just kind of bet big here and make it really expensive for me to float. So I kind of like his bet size, and for the most part, I think he's betting most of his range on this kind of dry board. So any overcards, any over pairs, I think he's definitely betting like this. It's pretty close here, I think. I fold here some of the time, I raise here some of the time, and I call. I do all 3 options. I think there are good reasons to do all 3. Folding is definitely fine because I have a gutter and 5 high. Calling and trying to take, or either hit my gut shot or take it away on later streets, is perfectly reasonable and makes you kind of a tougher player. Raising, I don't rep too much, but if he does have like Ace Queen, there's just not that much you can do about it. That's the option I use the least in this particular case. As you might have guessed, I didn't fold because it kind of makes for a boring hand, and I decided to call float and see a turn. So on the turn, I hit a pair. So now I have third pair and gutter, and Tiltosaurus Rex checks. I have Okay, so I'm either gonna bet or check here. Only two options, and it's kind of close. Well, what do we think about Tiltosaurus's checking range? Um, on some other board textures, let's say it was, I don't know, Jack 7 5 deuce or something like that, something a lot less textured. I think you can definitely like check jam here with overpairs, or check call with an overpair and try to pick off some of my floats. And I think it's perfectly reasonable. On this particular board texture, I think it's a lot less likely to do so. Some players may, although I think betting is the best with value hands. But Till's just smart. I think he realizes the board texture, because if we think about it, the hands I might call with on the flop, let's say 4 5, 5 6, 6 7, 7 8, 8 9, that type of those type of hands, all have pair and a gut shot that won't want to get check raised off of, and are very likely going to peel and call his turn bet here. So it's a spot where if he did have two tens or better, I think he should be betting here a lot of the time, because most of those hands, let's say I had 7 6, or the hand I actually have 4 5, most of the hands have showdown value now and don't want to get check raised, so they're going to check back. A lot of players will do that. So since my calling range is much wider than my betting range, I think he should be betting over pairs. So and since he did check, I think a lot of the time he doesn't have an overpair. So I think it's very unlikely that he shows up with tens or better. And I have a decision whether or not to check or bet. So we still have a little bit over 2 times pot left, so $460 effective stacks into $220. If I bet like 130, I really hate getting check raised here and kind of not knowing what to do. If I did bet, I would be bet calling, but I wouldn't be happy about it. I think a lot of times, like, he may put me on a float here that's betting, and then he can like check jam with ace king or ace queen or king queen or whatever else, and maybe show a profit doing that. And he can possibly have overpairs or 9x or whatever else, and my life will be miserable if he check raises. And I think it's not unlikely that he check raises in the spot, and I think I do have the best hand a fair amount. So protecting against 6 outs is there is merit to doing so, but I think checking is probably best. So I check back, and the river's a 9. I'm pairing the 9, and he checks. So in this particular spot where I said I think it's unlikely he has like tens or better, or maybe even 9x, he might check 9x, but I think he's leading those for value, because when I check back the turn, he probably expects me to bet a lot of my floats. So when I'm repping showdown value, I guess, maybe something like ace 10 or ace jack or 4 5 or whatever else. So I'm repping showdown value, so I think he would lead with most of his value hands in this particular spot. So when he checks, I have the option now to either check back or bet. Okay, whether or not we bet or check depends a lot on what our image is and how our player reacts. So, or how our opponent reacts. So let me rewind to the flop and kind of pretend that I'm more tight, straightforward. Okay, so let's assume at this point that we don't have 4 5 here. Let's just imagine that we have a range here, and where our image is a tight, straightforward reg, right? So when Tiltosaurus bets here, he's still smart, super tricky, and we call um, a tight kind of like ABC type player isn't going to float that often, right? So when it gets checked through on the turn, he reps showdown value, and then he checks. If we are a tight straightforward rig, we shouldn't be betting here on the river because we can't represent any bluffs, right? If Tiltosaurus isn't going to think that we're capable of floating and then checking back turn and then um, bluffing the river, then there's really no point in betting our hand. Um, he's not going to hear our calls with ace high. He's going to put us on like pocket eights, maybe like pocket tens or 7-8 or 9x or something like that. That's value betting, right? So he's not going to make any type of hero call. So we're going to need a different type of image, more of an image like I have, right? So if he's going to think that I am going to be calling the flop with, let's say, I don't know, King 10, King Jack, Queen Jack, and then the hands that I have, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, blah, 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 pocket 8. By the time we get to the river, he's going to expect me to, when I bet here, okay, I'm going to I bet 152 into 220. So, I don't know, it's like 73% of pot or something. The hands he expects me to have here, the range of hands, I think it's gonna be really polarized in his mind, right? So he's gonna think I have 9x pocket tens, although I'd probably bet pocket tens a lot of the time on the turn. So like 9x, maybe like pocket eights, and then for whatever reason like solo played boats and air, right? The air being like king jack, king 10. Maybe I'll turn ace 8 or ace 6 into a bluff or something like that. So those are the types of hands that he expects me to bet. So let's go over. Let's assume he has ace high here, and whether or not he should call against that perceived range. Okay, so let's look at my perceived range here, and that's going to be, most of the 9x hands, 10-9 suited plus, and then 9-8, 9-7, 9-6, and then the only like non-boat or 9x hands here that I may have, because usually I'm raising, sets at some point or betting sets on the turn, trying to get the money in, are 8-8 and 10-10. So against that range, my value range, ace x obviously can never win. And if I'm only bluffing with, let's just say, king jack and then jack 10 suited, where I could potentially be floating with, I don't know, king queen, king jack, king 10, queen 10, queen jack, all of those hands suited and offsuit. That's a pretty wide range. So if I'm only bluffing with a small percentage of those hands, king jack and jack 10 suited, this is what the his equity with like ace queen against this particular range, this kind of polarized range, but not super bluffy range, is 36%. So let me bring up a notepad document and kind of work you through the math in case you guys haven't done it before to see what odds he actually. Okay, so I bet $152. Into 220, the size of the pot. So the quick calculation here is he's going to have to call $152 and divide that by the amount I bet plus his amount back plus the pot size, which is 220. And this works out to 29%. So, against the range I just showed you, he needs, or yeah, so in order to call and break even here, he needs 29%. So at 29%, he's breaking even. Anything above that, he's going to be making money. And against the range I showed, a hand like Ace Queen is going to have 36%. So it's a spot where I think people kind of give up too frequently against. If your opponent has any type of bluffing range on the river, I mean, you can make hero calls with ace high and show a profit. So even though you're going to be losing 64% of the time, um, it's going to be a profitable call long term. So even though you lose a majority of the time, the pot odds more than make up for it. Okay, so back to my river bet. That's the reason I bet here, because I give Tiltosaurus Rex credit for being a good player, a player that's going to make hero calls with ace high because it's going to show a profit long term against my perceived range. So because of that, I can make a bet. Imagine he again was a nit or some standard straightforward reg that just doesn't even consider calling with ace high in the spot. Against that type of player, there's basically no reason for me to bet because every time he calls, he's going to show up with like 7-8, pocket eights, pocket tens, or something like that, or some hand with like showdown value that beats me. So in that particular case, against a straightforward player, I wouldn't make this thin value bet. Against Tiltosaurus Rex, however, who I do think is a very good player, I think I can make this bet. So now let's break down like the math and on how much money I'm going to make by making this particular bet. Okay, so here's the calling range I signed at Tiltosaurus Rex here. The hands that beat me, pocket tens maybe. That's kind of like iffy to even have that in there. Pocket eights, definitely play it like this. 8, 7, 7, 6. I don't think any of those hands are folding. If I think he's calling with ace high, he's definitely calling with the pairs that beat me. So 8, 8, 8, 7, 7, 6, 10, 10. All hands that beat me. And then ace king, ace queen, and then a suited and offsuit. I really think he's calling with ace jack as well, but I mean, just to be fair, let's say he calls with 2/3 the combos of ace high that he gets there with. Against this particular range, I have 64. I win 64% of the time when he calls here with this exact range. So when you make a value bet, you just need you need and want to be called by worse hands greater than 50% of the time. So if he's calling with 64, or if he's calling, I'm winning 64% of the time. I'm definitely making money here. Again, I'm not betting this hand against all but the very best regulars at 2-4. So I consider him one of them. So I mean, I think it's going to be a profitable bet. So another reason that we definitely want to bet a hand like 5-4 here, 6-7 pocket sixes or something like that, is because we are going to be floating here. We are going to be bluffing, right? And if we have a range like the perceived range I showed earlier, where it was mainly very strong value range and then some bluffs. If we are going to bluff ever, he can profitably call down with like ace high, right? But if we start adding in these hands 4-5 pocket sixes, maybe like 6-7, where he may not expect us to have them, it's going to make his decision to call not as plus EV, maybe even neutral. So it's gonna make his decisions much tougher, right? If we have a very polarized range here, his decision is fairly easy, even though he's calling with ace high, because against the range he's gonna win enough of the time. But the closer we get to neutral by adding hands like this, well, not only is it profitable for us, like I just showed you, because we win 64% of the time. The more we get his decisions to neutral, the much tougher his decisions become. So definitely a reason to make thin value bets like having the right image, being able to bluff more profitably. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'd appreciate comments on it. If you guys want me to do more videos like this or me playing, either is fine with me. This takes a little bit more time, but I mean, it's fun every once in a while. So this is Don Nguyen with BlueFirePoker.com signing off. Have a good one. Okay, actually, I forgot the results, or to add the results. So in case anyone's wondering, he tanks calls with Ace Queen, which I think was a good call. So really signing off this time. See you guys.